I'm the one who has to translate for her, not treat her, and that's the part nobody remembers when they tell this story. My name's Yesenia Cabrera, and I've worked as a medical interpreter at a district hospital for 6 years, standing in doorways between 2 languages while other people make the decisions. Dorothy Callahan didn't need me. She spoke English just fine, apologizing in it every few seconds about the trouble she was causing. It was the paramedic who needed me that first night, though he never once asked. He came through the ambulance bay doors at 2:50 in the morning with a woman on the gurney and a rapid string of Spanish falling out of him toward a family member trailing behind. The daughter, half panicked, half translating for her own mother in the waiting room, and somewhere in that tangle he caught my eye like he'd found a rope in open water. "Can you help her?" he said, tipping his head at the daughter. "I've got maybe 30% of what she's telling me, and none of the medical words." "That's what I'm here for," I said, and went to work, and didn't think much more of him than that, a paramedic with decent instincts and tired eyes, gone as soon as the handoff was finished. I didn't see him again for 3 years. In a hospital that size you'd think that was impossible, but shifts are strange that way. You can orbit the same building for a decade and never cross paths with half the people in it. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, I was called down to the emergency department for an unrelated case, a different family, different crisis, and there he was again, older around the eyes, leaning against the same doorway like he'd never left it. "You're the interpreter," he said, "from the night with Mrs. Callahan's daughter." I almost laughed. "You remember that?" "I remember thinking you made an impossible night easier," he said. "I never got your name." "Yesenia," I told him. "And you're Marcus. I heard the nurses use it enough times that night to remember." He smiled like that pleased him more than it should have. "I looked for you a couple times, actually. After. Never knew your schedule. I want to say I found that flattering right away, but my first thought, honestly, was suspicion. Men in this building have a way of turning gratitude into something else, and I'd learned to keep my footing." "Looked for me, why?" "Wanted to say thank you properly, and then it turned into wanting an excuse to see you again, if I'm being honest, which I didn't think interpreters usually appreciate hearing from strangers in hallways." "They don't," I said, "but it's a fair start." We ended up walking the same direction down the corridor after that, slower than either of us needed to walk, trading small pieces of 3 years. His transfer to a busier unit, my son starting kindergarten, the way the hospital cafeteria had gotten somehow both more expensive and worse. It wasn't dramatic. It was just easy, in a way I hadn't expected from a man I'd spoken to for maybe 6 total minutes across 3 years. The complication came a few weeks later when Dorothy Callahan's daughter, Renee, recognized me in the pharmacy line and hugged me like I was family, thanking me all over again for that night, for making her mother's fear legible to the people trying to help her. Marcus was 2 people back in the same line, and I watched something shift in his face. Not jealousy exactly, more like he was recalculating who I was to this family, wondering if my work meant I belonged to every hard night in this building instead of to any one part of my own life. "You carry a lot of people's worst hours," he said afterward, quieter than before. "I never thought about what that costs the person doing the carrying. We only ever think about it costing us." "It costs something," I admitted. "Some nights more than others. I go home, and I don't always have language left over for my own kid, which is a strange thing for someone who trades in language all day." He didn't try to fix that, which I appreciated more than he probably knew. He just said, "That's a real thing to carry," and let it sit there between us instead of rushing past it toward something easier. We started finding reasons to end up in the same hallway after that, not scheduled, never official, just the kind of overlap 2 people build when they've decided, without saying so, that they want more of it. I won't pretend I wasn't careful. I'd watched enough co-workers get burned by hospital romances that went sideways and then had to keep working the same units afterward, faces arranged into professional blankness over something that used to be tender. I told him that, straight out, one evening in the cafeteria that had gotten worse and more expensive. "I'm not interested in being a mistake you have to be polite to for the next 10 years, I said. "Then let's not make it that," he said. Let's just take it slow enough to find out what it actually is before we name it wrong. That felt like the right answer, the kind you can't fake your way into saying. So that's what we did. Slow, unglamorous, built out of hallway minutes and shared coffee in a cafeteria with bad lighting, out of him learning enough Spanish to surprise me with a badly pronounced good morning, out of me learning that underneath the easy charm was a man who'd sat with Dorothy Callahan's fear that night, like it mattered to him personally, not just professionally. I think about that sometimes, how the whole thing started because a frightened daughter needed someone to carry her mother's words across a gap, and how the two of us, translator and paramedic, ended up needing someone to carry our own words across a different kind of gap, the one that opens up between two careful people who've both been burned before. I don't know if every version of this story ends the same way mine did. I know Renee still stops by sometimes, and I know Marcus still can't pronounce Buenos Dias quite right, and I know that some nights, when I'm standing between two languages trying to make someone's fear make sense to a stranger, I think about the fact that it was exactly that work, unglamorous and mostly invisible, that carried me toward the best thing in my life instead of past it. I still wonder what would have happened if I'd just handed off that translation and walked away without a second thought, the way I do most nights. Some doors only open once, and you don't always know which one it was until years later, looking back down the hallway.